Today, we're going to take a look at Autodesk Build, what it is and why it matters. Essentially, we're going to do a basic intro just to sort of refresh everybody's expectations. So let's just kind of jump through the PowerPoint here real quick. I'll break this up into 3 segments. We'll do a quick presentation. We'll jump into the browser and work with Build. And of course, take some questions and answers along and give some answers along the way. So hopefully we'll provide answers to these questions. What is Build? Does it unify our data? Does it connect our field and our office? Does it provide improved accountability based on where the project stands? Are we waiting for somebody? Are we behind schedule? All those sorts of things. So that's our agenda and goals. First, what is Autodesk Build? It's actually many buckets of functionality, as you can see there from the slide, all built on a common data environment with data, insight, and administration functionality. No reason for me to read all of this information. You guys can then, of course, peruse the particular bucket that you're familiar with. So let me pause here for a moment. Ashley has a few polls we'd like to push into the presentation at this moment. So if you want to go ahead and publish those, thank you. So the first question here is, what's your familiarity with any of this functionality? Do you use Build today? Do you use Smartsheet? Do you use something else? Go ahead and fill out the questionnaire there. So we've got some folks in Build. We've got some folks in other apps. This is all good feedback. And once we get some more information here, let's see where we at. We got about half of everyone voted. Let's see where we are. Obviously, you may be using a combination of some of these tools. I realize this is just one. We're just looking for what your primary tool is, I guess. And of course, there's more to this conversation. GoToMeeting kind of limits us to a short list. All right, waiting for a couple of more folks. Okay, so you guys can see pretty evenly distributed there, except for Oracle has no one, which is fine. But a smattering of everybody across the board. All right, you go ahead and put the second poll up there, Ashley. So obviously, if you've got, you guys are using Build, what level? But if you're not using Build, have you poked around in it? Have you not even opened it? So of course, this should be all over the board as well. What experience do you have with Autodesk Build? Yes. It is interesting to find out that some people don't know that Autodesk does make this platform. Okay, we'll give it a few more seconds here. Interesting. Use it on every project. Use it on a few projects. Poked around a little bit. Interesting. So we've got some good feedback there. So some people have fully adopted it, and other folks are still sort of dipping their toes in. I think we had one more question there. Yeah, there we go. So in this, forget the software for 2 seconds. What's your role? Generally speaking, you may wear many hats on a construction project. But what's your primary hat, I suppose? Are you the architect or the contractor? Other would fall into owner or developer. Or maybe you're all of these people. I guess that would still fall into other. There are some companies that own, design, construct, and operate facilities. Okay, so it looks like a predominance of the audience is in the design sector, if you will. I think I've got one more poll, or maybe not. So given the responses we just heard, go ahead and kind of fill in where you fall into some of these phases. This is a situation where others really kind of a bigger bucket. There's probably 6 or 7 other options I really wanted to include. But since a majority of you folks are in the design phase, if you could let me know where we go here. Do you do model coordination more than anything? Are you qualifying bids? Are you just creating the construction documents? Sort of agnostic to which application you might be using, but what are you actually doing in those applications? Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. So there's the results. That leads me to sort of set the context for how we might want to address some of the informational purposes here. All right. So let me move on in the PowerPoint. Okay. So one of the first things that Build can do for you is address document management. It's a unified place, again, in the cloud, where we can version files, provide control of documentation, even approve files, right? Sort of release them for construction, as it were. Great example of that might be, let's see, let's take a look at our first little example. I can limit access based on, whether you're an individual user or maybe your company, or even, maybe in this case, everyone. So depending on those situations, we can provide different permissions. Versioning. Once I've got the files up in the cloud, I can compare versions. I can see what's different and highlight what's changed just simply by comparing versions. Lastly, again, I mentioned approvals. Once we got to the point where we want to release a particular file, PDF, DWG, whatever, to stakeholders, we can do an internal review or an external review and have that go through a review process where there's X number of people. Maybe it's a group of people, or maybe it's just one final reviewer, and provide some accountability on that. So we can set up approvals. Again, this is all just fundamental at the moment. Getting into some of the build technology, we can, what's a good word, manage costs. So budgets, forecasting, change orders, those are all common tasks through a construction project. So even in construction administration, right, those are all things that we care about. And of course, getting paid. So a great example, oops, I copied the same thing twice there. There we go, budget creation. So we can create a budget based on various aspects. You can create your own structure, your own master list, provide flexible contracting based on project type. So whether it's, you're working for a school district or a commercial builder, or maybe a local land developer, right? You're just building houses. However you want to turn this, to address your functionality of way you work and approve things, you can always set that up for your needs. Change orders, of course, those are inevitable. Change. That's why we have all of this system. If we never had to worry about change, we could just write it all down on tablets and call it a day. Not iPads, tablets, but like stone tablets. But here with change orders, we can address that change inevitability, provide, and here's a great example of accountability and visibility to where things stand. You can easily, as an executive or a project manager, come in and look and see where all of our issues are, where all of our changes are. And of course, ultimately, when we're handling payments, we're just keeping track of this. You can integrate with uh, certainly payment platforms. Uh, there's an open API that Autodesk allows you to then connect to other platforms. So you have the data here and you can keep the data here, but then once you release something for payment, then you can trigger Deltek or whatever platform you're using to then process those funds. It's sort of like your Apple Pay button inside of your local pizza shop app, right? They're not actually processing it, they're telling Apple to process it. Same sort of thing here. Even better. Right now we've got all this data. We can start to forecast where we are on a given project. Are we ahead? Are we behind? Based on our schedule, which we'll get to. Okay. So speaking of the actual project, what can we do? These are all things that are big ticket items for people that do um, construction administration. So submittals, RFIs, etc. All big stuff here. Apparently, I copied the same slides 5 times. Bear with me here. I don't know how I did that. That's pretty amazing. I don't know how I did that. I copied the PowerPoint 5 different times inside of itself. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, we'll start with submittals. Perfect. So submittals often happen for many different reasons, of course. But here we can see a list of submittals depending on their status, what's portion of the specification they apply to, and of course I can see this. I haven't even mentioned this part. There is a mobile app that goes along with this, not just working in a browser. So of course, with your laptop or even a large tablet, you can go to the web and peruse your submittals. But if you have a mobile device, there's a specific app. Some people prefer the mobile app on a tablet too, but again, either way, the app is sort of formatted for that particular device. Um, what else specifically about submittals? Again, accountability is sort of the precursor here, right? Even if I'm not processing these, it's real easy to kind of come in and check and see where we are, right? Just that visibility. RFIs. How do we address, okay, I've got an issue, I can't resolve it. It's a change, it's going to be a change. So I've got to document that process, and we can do that with the RFI workflow. Um, whether that's a minor or a major detail, right? We can keep track of them and look at the status. Again, I'm probably beating a drum here. It's all pretty visible to stakeholders that are in the project. Schedules. Man, this is a big one. Why use this scheduling tool inside of Autodesk Build versus just using Primavera or Microsoft Project, or even some people use just Excel, right? Certainly you can, and actually you can import that here to then utilize sort of the scheduling aspect and the forecasting and get that information all in one spot. And some people do that on the regular. Maybe their scheduler just works in, Primavera. You can constantly update what's here with a new plan. And maybe it's a separate plan for a subcontractor, right? You've got all these different plans that you might have in place, and you can bring them in to then help facilitate and address, okay, now we've got an issue, this affects this task in the schedule. All good bits of information here. And again, you can see this, from our mobile perspective too. Ultimately, if you're trying to keep track of all this information, it's a lot to wade through, but we can have daily reports and to sort of summarize and or detail situations, whether it's timesheets, uh, work logs, uh, status of issues, how many RFIs are outstanding. There's ways to summarize and sort of bring together, the overall status of your project. Again, you can certainly dive into the weeds on any particular issue or RFI, but these daily reports that can run in the background, and then it's there first thing in the morning, gives you a little quick overview of what's going on. Correspondence. Again, people often ask the question, what do we even put in Autodesk Build? Do we need to use all of this? Do we need to use every little bit? The overarching concept here is if it's project information, then it should be stored in the project within Autodesk Build. How do we determine how far do we go with that? Well, there are functionality aspects here that provide you to take that as far as you want. And correspondence is just a great example of that. So maybe you just send an email back and forth about a particular issue, didn't actually elevate to an RFI, but maybe it did. So now I can attach this email correspondence to that RFI, right? Everything's now connected. Projects get an email address, so you can just include that as a carbon copy, or you can just create the email right here in the browser. Whichever way you prefer to do it, it will work fine. Meeting minutes falls into the same sort of categories of like how far do you take this, but you can create an agenda and then during the meeting turn it into minutes, assign an RFI to an issue, give it a due date. Again, we're starting to connect the dots across all the different bits of functionality. So as long as the data is in the project, now we can reference each other and how does that impact schedule? Does it impact cost? All of these things are starting to get into the nitty gritty when we start to include minutes, meeting minutes. Specifications, of course, the foundation for how we build things, in addition to the construction documents. Is this something I have to type in manually? Thank goodness, no. You can upload the information and it will scan it and process it to provide the specification platform here. Depending on your format, are you using master spec or something else? Obviously, there's some assumptions there and there's different formattings, but it can then process and include that. Now, is your spec, if there's issue for construction, is it maybe it's a revised specification based on an RFI, right? All those different things. Again, nothing is set in stone here, but how do we then include all that information in our project? So we've got a specification section. Okay, now we're getting down into it, right? So our field operations. Do we have any punch lists we have to deal with? Do we have a quality issue? So not just, man, I definitely copied the heck out of this particular set of slides, didn't I? I did. Man, I did that 5 times. Here we go. Oh my goodness. Okay. How do we minimize mistakes? Maybe I should do this with PowerPoint, right? So I have forms that I can provide for my field crews to then submit information, whether it's a punch list or a safety checklist or whatever the case is, right? We're trying to plan this. And of course, I can do that from scratch, or in most cases, we've got a form already and we can consume that and create that data input here as well. Quality control. Hey, it rained today. Did the construction forms, concrete forms hold up? Um, the the loader was cleaned and prepped for stone? Was the bed cleaned, or right? Any sorts of form control that you want to do, right? Were certain procedures followed? We can add photos to document, right? We can attach it to an issue if it wasn't, right? All these things start to interconnect. And lastly, issue management. So how do we address some of those different issues? I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit too, because I don't want to get bogged down, and I'm realizing it's already almost 12:30. So just from a high level, we can even extend this to safety. Again, inspections, observations, planning, almost as important as the stuff that we actually build. We have an ability to process that as well. So inspections. Did they wear their hard hats? Did they wear their eye protection? Right? Do that on the daily. Uh, who was the inspector? Was this report reviewed? Right? You guys get the idea. How do we set all this up? You can create your own checklists, your own incident reports. Again, using various tools built in, or again, if you have your own PDF forms. Um, let's see. Lastly, close out at the end of all of this. What do we do with all this data? We can turn over the documentation, provide as-built information. In theory, all of this is continually modified and updated as we go along in the construction process. And at the end of it, the data should be in a format that's applicable and helpful for the owner and or tenant. So where are we at in the process? Did we need to identify any assets that need to be repaired for warranty purposes? Do we need to quantify the number of defects, right? So commissioning. And again, I'm looking at this from just a field perspective, right, through a tablet. But all of this can also live inside the browser. Lots of different ways to do this. Again, because we're all built on top of that unified document platform, we've got an ability to then push that data, release it, and leverage it for the downstream use. Again, it doesn't have to be everything. Maybe it's just the warranties. Maybe it's just the final documentation. As if that wasn't enough information, all of this is built on an insight platform that can then, so we mentioned reports already, but now we can create dashboards, again, sort of in that high level view of where we are. We can connect to external platforms to process payments, to then analyze data. Maybe you're using Power BI to do this as well. So all sorts of ways to then make better decisions faster. Because at the end of the day, time equals money in many of these cases. So here's an example of a dashboard. Right, we've got our little project map there. It might rain today, it might not. What are our issues that are outstanding? All of that's simply pulling information from the project itself, whether it be the files, whether it be our RFI list. Where do we stand? So you can see all those dashboards there. So there's specific dashboards for specific areas. And of course, you can sort of customize that for your own specific primary dashboard. I mentioned reports. You can run these at any time, or you can have them scheduled depending on how you wanted to process all the information. Some people schedule them weekly. Some people schedule them monthly. Kind of depends again on how fast your project is moving. If you are doing that data connection aspect, we can also schedule those extractions so that they're available for import into your platform. We can also, instead of doing one-off, we can actually leave the data here in the construction cloud and make a direct connection, be it read only or read write, depending on the what we're trying to do, to your particular tool set, as I mentioned before, be it Smartsheet, be it Deltek, whatever other platform you want that particular other area of information hosted. But when it comes to direct project information, again, the idea is to keep it here and share it where needed. Lastly, construction IQ. Right, here's a situation where real easy to kind of see. We've got some risk factors there. We've got some high risk RFIs. We've got some code compliance. These are all categorized as we're submitting those particular RFIs. Man, it has been a half an hour and I've said a lot about information. Finally, for those that need to then standardize this, we can create uniformity across our organization, provide accountability for how these things get set up. So just real quick, real easy to then create a project template so that your structure is the same, your permissions are the same. You don't have to do this by hand every time. If you need to share data across projects, that happens. Maybe you want to create data in your account and share it to another team's account. Oftentimes when a project is created and set up by the architect, if you just, and they'll invite you to it, of course, because you're the subcontractor or maybe the site engineer or whoever, right? And you're all supplying information to that. Once that architect shuts off that project and archives it, you've lost access to the data you supply to it. So oftentimes what people do is create data in their own account and then bridge it into the primary project account, which is usually the architect. And that can be a two-way street too, right? So maybe I'm the site guy and I want to then consume any released architectural backgrounds that they want me to use for the footprint of the building. So it can be a two-way street. User management's pretty straightforward on how we provide permissions. Maybe it's across the board, maybe it's only for certain aspects. Nobody has access to anything. They have to be given access specifically in order to do something. So even better when it comes to what's available and to whom they can get it. Here are the apps that I was talking about. These are the connectors to other platforms. Maybe you're working in ArcGIS and you're a local township and you want to consume some of the information that they're going to create. Maybe you're a drone surveyor and you're using Drone Deploy and you want to feed in daily snapshots of the site to the project, but you're in Drone Deploy, you're not in Autodesk Build. So you can make that connection too. All sorts of apps in this gallery. You simply activate it and give it the appropriate credentials for making that connection, and you tell it whether hey, this is read only, or we're just doing a two-way transfer, or whatever the situation may be. But these are well-established apps. You can even create your own app connections if you want. Not terribly difficult, but probably the next level once you get to that point. Lots of flexibility when it comes to being able to leverage data across platforms. All right, I'm going to skip this because I'm going to do this part live, blah, blah, blah. How does this all apply to me? Lots of words. Maybe I don't even care about half of it. Where do I fit in the process? Build as an application generally fits across the pre-construction through construction segments of the life cycle of a project. So that's going to have everybody in there, right? The owner, the tenant, the designers, the contractors, the subcontractors, um, municipalities, agencies, right? Everybody is in that sort of piece of the puzzle. Well, how do we eliminate the confusion? How do we eliminate misinformation? How do we eliminate costs related to all of this? Well, easily, the sooner we can make those decisions, the better. Because as we all know, once we get further along in a project under construction, the cost to make that change becomes exponentially, uh, almost in some cases, unviable, right? You just abandon the project sometimes. Um, happens more than we probably want to admit. Maybe a different developer takes it over, right? Because they've got different levels of funding. But if we can make those changes earlier in the project, how can we do that? Information, visibility, transparency, accountability, being able to do those things early on in the process allow us to then save money, increase profit, reduce schedule conflicts, right? All of this is about information. So what are some common tasks that we can do? Respond to RFIs, review submittals, monitor progress, uh, issue official design changes. I don't know why my screen here is super pixelated. Uh, project meetings, punch lists. Those are like some of the big ticket items, right? That we can pull out of all of the information that I just sent you, showed you through describing the larger platform of Build. We can put all of these big ticket items in one spot. Okay, so before I jump into the demonstration, let me check the questions and answers and provide some answers here. So first question, are there any capabilities that allow managing multiple projects? Imagine you're using this in an OEM design and fab shop that works on 100 projects over the course of a year. We need to coordinate schedules between the projects and manage shop floor resources and staff between the different projects. Great question. Everything I showed was sort of on a per project basis. So let me start the demonstration looking at that very aspect. So let me bring up my browser here. I'm currently just looking at the home address here, acc.autodesk.com, but I just happen to be looking at my projects that I've been invited to. I'm just going to jump into this particular project. Here's a starting point. And again, as you can see, I've got a bunch of functionality there on the left. And this is my home tab, if you will, for the build functionality. But this is only looking at a specific project. How can I look at this across projects? Two things. If I go back to the account and look at uh, my access, and let's go find my access here real quick. There are different access levels. And the one that we're referring to that helps you see across projects as a project manager, not just things that you may be doing across projects, is the executive access level. Turning that on gives me additional dashboards, if you will. So if I go to my home, what I see on my home isn't that executive overview. These are just things that I'm a part of, uh, things that are assigned to me, things that I've recently looked at, etc. But in the top left corner is an executive insight button. And this is very much like the insight button for the individual project, but now we're looking across projects that I'm a part of. So depending on the overview that you're looking for and where we are on a given project, I can see, hey, I've got 3 open design issues across these 3 different projects, 4 different issues across 3 different projects. If I've got safety information across projects, I can see that. So this executive overview, which provides you that ability to then monitor many things at once. Now, in the case of fabrication, we're probably talking about design or quality, where they would show up on which dashboard. That's sort of the basic idea there. So hopefully that answers your question, Matt. All right. Any other questions? So yeah, I'll just we'll put that up in the Q&A panel. All right, nice. So let me just jump into a project here and sort of walk around here for a short bit. Again, some of those big ticket items, what were we talking about there? We've got RFIs, submittals, project meetings. Real easy to kind of jump into those photos. You can come into a photos area and add your photos here. Why is this? Why would photos? I didn't even mention that in my list of things, right? There's just so much here. Adding photos is pretty straightforward. You can drag and drop or pick them. But of course, photos have metadata, and then you can search on that metadata based on location or photo type or tags you may have added, or maybe you've got 3 different field crews, right? So who uploaded the photo? Maybe your inspector, right? You can filter all sorts of things based off of these attributes. And then, of course, if I actually had photos with metadata, I could see where that photo was taken on our map. So I mentioned RFIs. Let me jump there as a starting point. Incidentally, the construction cloud platform as a whole is trying to be as intuitive as possible. And oftentimes, the first time you are in a particular area on a project, you will always see this ability to take a tour, do some learning, or even take a course. So I should mention briefly, there is a website, learnacc.autodesk.com, that gives you introductory sort of get your feet wet training on all of the functionality we're talking about across everything, not just build for that matter. So if I go here to build, there are these short little, you can see I've registered for some I've completed, some I haven't registered for, etc. But you can see we're not breaking the bank on time. This is 20 minutes. That's 90 minutes. Okay, so maybe that's a long lunch one day, or maybe after work. Right? Well, all these are very short. The idea being, here's an introduction to this piece or that piece of functionality. And it uses your Autodesk login that you would have anyway as a way to kind of keep track of what you've learned and where you are, whether you're registered or not. So that's just a quick little tidbit about all of the education that they're trying to provide just to get you started. Okay, so that aside, obviously we can provide education for you as we tweak things and set things up for you for your particular company. But certainly the introductory stuff is common to everyone. All right, so RFIs. Let me go ahead and create an RFI. I don't have any assigned to me or visible to me, so let me just create one. What can I do? I've got a status. I've got a title. Maybe I'll put today's date as a prefix. I'm making up an RFI. I can assign a code reviewer, anyone from a company or specific members. I can give this a due date. I can't put yesterday as much as we would like to. We'll say Friday. I can enter some more details, but an RFI says where we provide you an ability to have a question and an answer. I know this is not a typical RFI, just explaining the process, right? I don't know, who knows? So maybe that's a particular answer that I'm looking for, or maybe I'll just let them answer. Again, I can add references based on, maybe there was email, we had a meeting, whatever, right? I can assign that to a reference or assign that as a reference to the RFI. We can even stack the RFIs, right? So now I'm cascading them. So this relates to another RFI. Does this cost impact? Does it schedule impact? Yes or no? No impact on cost. Right. So lots of different attributes to this RFI we can create. There we go. So there's an open RFI with all the details I just gave it. There's always an activity log with everything we do in the platform. So whether it be an RFI, submittals, specific files, sheets, whatever we're doing, we always have visibility into how things were modified or deleted or changed or created. You can add comments, right? This is all about transparency. So if I go back to my list here, I can see the list of RFIs. You can see that's in a draft. Let me go ahead and sit. It's still in draft, so I'm going to submit it for review. I haven't configured my workflow. So obviously there's some setup here. I've got to make someone a creator. We'll say reviewer. There we go. I can define my RFI types. I can define a custom field. So we've got 4 different types of fields. So maybe a multi-select versus single select. I've got some advanced settings. Do I want to be able to reopen RFIs? Do I want visibility to see closed RFIs, or do we want to hide them because we've got 1,000 RFIs on this job and we just don't need to see them all? So some options there for RFIs. What else? Submittals. Let's take a look at submittals. So submittal is different than an RFI, of course. You can see I've got to do some setup here as well. So we'll add myself. Default manager. Where are my responses? Those are fine. What numbering method do I want for my submittals? If I had specs, I would use specs, but we'll just use global for the example. So I can create a submittal item. So if I had a spec section, I could assign it, but I'll just create one here. I don't know, I'm going to make up a number. Oops. Uh, Maybe I wanted to use a certain type of cleaner for the site, and I'm submitting, a product spec for this particular cleaner I wanted to use on the site. Um, Safety requirements. So maybe this is product data high because we've got to clean up something yesterday. Maybe I had a PDF or maybe a picture from my phone of the spec itself, right? I can do all that. I need it tomorrow because we got to get people out there. And we'll put the approval date there tomorrow so I can get the materials there by the end of the week. We'll give it a couple of days lead time. I hit create. Oop, I forgot to pick my spec. There we go. Oh, I love when demos fail, but you saw what goes into that. Lots of information, right? All of this is about information. What else can we do? Project meetings. When I create a meeting, if I've got a template, if I want to standardize, I could do it from a template, but I'll just do a new meeting for the sake of demonstration. Again, everything starts as an agenda until we actually have the meeting, and then it turns into minutes. So let's say tomorrow at 10 a.m. until 10:30, we will do a Teams meeting. And it's going to burp about permissions, which is fine. There it goes. So now I've got my Teams link. What are we talking about? Reviewing site cleanup. What materials to use for site cleanup. Brand X, brand Y. Oops. Etc. And I can make them individual issues. I can even attach some of the material documentation, right? Anyway, I'm boring people at this point. So you can create your meeting agenda, invite people to this. Now, here's the thing that's often difficult about this. Any of our projects, in order to get to the data in a project, you have to be invited to the project and then, of course, given permissions to see specific bits of data. You don't get to see all the bits just because you have access to the project. Well, what if I've got a vendor I want to include in this meeting who's not in the project? That's where I would create a non-member. So Joe Windex for glass cleaners. I put his mail in there, email, and off I go. All right, and so now I've got non-members that can be part of that meeting. And of course, this would be cleanup materials, would be the meeting name. Once we actually go to have the meeting, we flip this to minutes. So the meeting happened, we mark things as minutes, and then I've got these as open issues when we are done. So there's my minutes. I can create a follow-up meeting if I needed to, and then on and on you go. Under items, I could see the 2 open issues from that. So then I can pick on those items and then create assignments had I done it while it was still on an agenda. Anyway, so lots of things that we can do with meetings. Reports, I'm noticing we're coming up here on the bottom of the hour. So I just want to come to reports. I can create a particular report on anything. So here's some pre-formatted reports. So RFI detail. It's going to be a PDF. I'll save it into my project and I'll save it as a version, right? So I've got a versioned report filtered by status, due date. Actually, I want to, we'll say by cost impact. Yeah, no, yes, maybe. I don't know, making up stuff here as I go, right? How do I want it to sort? We'll say sort by due date. And then I can run that report. Wait a minute, do I want this to be a one-off or do I want it to be scheduled? So I've got a choice. I can say that. I can rename it. Overdue cost RFIs. I don't know, making up a scenario. I hit run and save. And now that happens on regular. Now, if I want to go adjust the schedule, I can. It's creating it the first time. Only because I didn't finish that doing the filter. But once it's created, then I can revise the schedule. Even apply recipients so they get notification when it's done. Lots of information. Okay, so without being overly verbose, I've spent an hour reviewing, addressing, and informing about Autodesk Build. Whether we're talking about pre-construction, bid management, we're talking about construction issues, right? I'm trying to find the sweet spot across all of those things that's sort of commonality for folks. Obviously, some things will apply to others more than, other people, right? Everybody's got their own little segment that they care about. But if we can kind of see the big ticket items that are across roles and responsibilities, you can obviously see the benefits of some of these different functionalities. All right.